13. Scandalous black R&B legends. Autopsies you were never supposed to hear about. Imagine the autopsy room doors swinging open, revealing files the world was never supposed to see. Cold, clinical reports that expose the darkest truths behind music's brightest stars. Michael Jackson's nightly battle with Propofol Prince's fatal counterfeit pill. Whitney Houston's bathtub tragedy. Each case reads like a forbidden chapter in R&B history. These weren't just accidents. They were scandals sealed in medical ink, forcing us to confront the hidden cost of fame. Are you ready to uncover the secrets they tried to bury? Hit like, subscribe, and join Legends of Black Excellence as we pull back the curtain on 13 untold stories. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's death on June 25, 2009 was one of the most shocking moments in modern music history. The King of Pop. A man who sold over 400 million records worldwide. Collapse autopsy report was released. It revealed a scandalous truth that forever changed the way the world remembered him. The report stated that Michael's body contained propofol, a powerful anesthetic never intended for home use. The concentration was so high that the Los Angeles County coroner ruled his death acute propofol intoxication. This sterile phrase masked a horrifying reality. Michael had been using the surgical drug nearly every night just to sleep. The autopsy even revealed traces of benzodiazepines like lorazepam and midazolam sedati. The world gasped again when officials classified his death as a homicide. Dr. Conrad Murray, his personal physician, admitted to administering the drug in unsafe conditions without proper monitoring equipment. In court, anesthesiologists testified that using propofol outside an operating room was unthinkable. Fans who once saw Michael as invincible now realized he had been gambling with death every night. The physical findings in the autopsy added another layer of scandal. Despite being 50 years old, Michael's body was shockingly frail. He weighed just 136 pounds at 5'9". His hair was mostly gone, replaced by a wig. Numerous injection marks scarred his arms. The report painted a haunting picture. The King of Pop, once a symbol of vitality and energy, had been slowly consumed by dependency. In interviews with close friends, one chilling detail resurfaced again and again. Michael had pleaded, "I just want to sleep." For a man who commanded stadiums of 80,000 people, what he longed for was the simplest human need. That desperation drove him into the arms of propofol, a substance known among doctors as milk of amnesia. Fans were left to wonder, how could someone with so much power, money, and fame become powerless against insomnia? Beyond the medical evidence, the autopsy symbolized something bigger, the dark side of show business. Michael had faced decades of racial prejudice, intense media scrutiny, and lawsuits that drained his soul. His comeback tour, This Is It, was scheduled for 50 sold-out shows in London. But behind the scenes, he was a man haunted by exhaustion, physical decline, and the crushing pressure of perfection. The autopsy showed that his heart stopped not on stage, but in the isolation of his bedroom, where cameras and applause could not follow. The trial of Dr. Murray only deepened the scandal. In 2011, Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 4 years in prison, though he served just 2. The verdict confirmed what the autopsy already revealed, that Michael Jackson's death was not a natural tragedy, but a preventable crime. The official report remains one of the most downloaded public records in Los Angeles history. A grim reminder that even legends can fall in the most human, vulnerable way. Michael Jackson's autopsy didn't just explain why he died, it exposed the contradictions that defined his life. A man who gave the world Billie Jean and Thriller, who broke MTV's color barrier, who moonwalked into history, ultimately surrendered to a syringe of propofol. He became a cautionary tale about fame medicine and the hidden costs of being a global icon. The King of Pop, who once seemed larger than life, was brought down not by scandalous rumors, but by the cold, clinical truth of an autopsy report that the world was never supposed to read. Prince. On April 21, 2016, the world stopped. when Prince Rogers Nelson was found lifeless in an elevator at his Paisley Park estate in Minnesota. For a man who had built his image on total control of his music, his stage, even his very name. The autopsy revealed a scandalous and cruel irony. Prince did not die from wild excess reckless living or public controversy. He died from a counterfeit pill. The official autopsy report confirmed his death as the result of fentanyl toxicity. The numbers were staggering. His blood contained 67.8 micrograms of fentanyl per liter, a level far beyond the 3 to 58 micrograms considered fatal. His liver, stomach, and other organs also showed high concentrations, leaving no doubt that he had unknowingly ingested a deadly dose. Prince believed he was taking Vicodin, a legitimate prescription painkiller he used to manage years of hip pain brought on by decades of explosive stage performances. Instead, the pills were laced with a drug up to 50 times stronger than heroin. The tragedy was compounded by the fact that just days before his death, Prince had already experienced an overdose scare. His private jet made an emergency landing in Illinois after he was found unconscious, and doctors administered naloxone, a drug designed to reverse opioid overdoses. The public explanation at the time was flu-like symptoms. The autopsy later proved it was something much darker. He had been teetering on the edge, saved once by medical intervention, but caught again in the trap days later. The scandal deepened when investigators scoured the supply chain. How could one of the most famous musicians in history, worth hundreds of millions, end up with counterfeit medication? The DEA and U.S. Attorney's Office launched an intensive probe, but no one was ever charged. The case closed with no accountability, leaving fans with a bitter taste. A genius who once fought record labels for ownership of his music catalog, even changing his name to a symbol as an act of defiance, was brought down by a single pill he didn't even know he was taking. Close friends recalled that Prince often avoided mainstream vices. He didn't drink heavily, avoided public drug use, and lived relatively clean compared to many peers. His Achilles heel was physical pain. Years of splits, spins, and leaping across stages had destroyed his hips. He performed through agony, rarely canceling shows, but behind the purple glamour was a man quietly searching for relief. Isn't it haunting to think that one of the most disciplined artists of his generation could fall victim to something as simple as misplaced trust in a pill? The autopsy also highlighted the paradox of Prince's life. He fought fiercely to control every detail of his career. He wrote, arranged, and produced his own music, performed on dozens of instruments, and guarded his image with legendary secrecy. Yet at the very end, he lost control over the one thing he could not negotiate: what entered his bloodstream. The aftermath of the autopsy was as explosive as any headline he had ever generated in life. Fans mourned not only the loss of a legend, but also the way he was lost, caught in the middle of a counterfeit drug epidemic that has claimed thousands of lives across America. Prince, who once seemed untouchable, became a symbol of a national crisis. His passing wasn't just the death of a man. It was a mirror reflecting a broader tragedy of trust, pain, and betrayal. Prince's music still resonates. Purple Rain, Kiss When Doves Cry. Timeless reminders of his genius. But the autopsy etched a cruel footnote to his story. The man who took on the music industry, and one who kept his art fiercely. His own was undone not by scandalous indulgence, but by deception hidden in a pill bottle. For millions, that remains the hardest truth to accept. Whitney Houston. On February 11, 2012, the world lost one of the most iconic voices of all time. Whitney Houston, often called The Voice, was discovered unconscious in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles just hours before she was scheduled to appear at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party. The autopsy that followed not only revealed her cause of death, but also unveiled a scandalous story of exhaustion, illness, and neglect that many believe could have been prevented. The official report concluded that Whitney died from accidental drowning with cocaine use and atherosclerotic heart disease, listed as contributing factors. Toxicology results also showed the presence of other substances in her system: marijuana, Xanax, Benadryl, and Flexeril, but none were directly fatal. Instead, the lethal mix was cocaine impairing her consciousness, paired with a weakened heart that could not withstand the stress. This wasn't just a sudden collapse. It was the inevitable outcome of years of struggle written in cold medical detail. Her heart condition was severe. The coroner noted that 60% of her arteries were narrowed, a dangerous sign of advanced cardiovascular disease for a woman only 48 years old. Combined with cocaine's stimulant effect, her body was pushed beyond its limits. The bathtub became the final stage, the water acting as the silent curtain closing on one of the greatest performers the world had ever seen. The scandal lies in the unanswered questions that followed. Friends and family were aware of Whitney's health issues. They knew about her long battle with addiction, and they knew her heart was fragile. Yet in that hotel suite, medications still surrounded her. Was she enabled by those closest to her? Did they turn a blind eye to her choices in order to keep the diva comfortable? Or did the pressure of performing and appearances leave her with no space to truly heal? These are the questions that haunt fans. The autopsy also emphasized the tragic contrast between her public image and her private reality. Just hours before her death, witnesses reported seeing her laughing and preparing for the party. She looked radiant, as if ready to return to the spotlight. Yet within a short span, that laughter transformed into silence. The coroner's notes described water in her lungs, cocaine metabolites in her blood, and a weakened heart unable to recover. Each sterile line in the report told a story of a superstar whose body could no longer match her willpower. Whitney's death became more than just a personal tragedy. It became a cultural shockwave. She had once stood on the Olympic stage in 1988, delivering one moment in time with a voice that touched millions. She had sold over 200 million records, breaking barriers for Black female artists worldwide. Yet in the end, her life ended not with applause, but in the quiet isolation of a hotel room. The contrast between the glory of her career and the scandal of her death remains one of the most painful ironies in R&B history. The media amplified the haunting image of her final moments, branding her the tragic diva. But the autopsy gave the true story, a woman carrying decades of pressure, pain, and addiction whose heart could no longer carry her voice. Whitney Houston's death was not just a medical event. It was the collapse of a cultural icon under the weight of fame, addiction, and fragile humanity. Her autopsy was never meant to be read by the public, but once revealed, it turned into an indictment of the industry that celebrated her brilliance while ignoring her decline. Whitney, who once sang, "I will always love you," to heal broken hearts across the world, left behind the bitter reminder that even the strongest voices can fall silent when no one is there to listen. Sam Cooke. On the night of December 11, 1964, Los Angeles was shaken by the news that Sam Cooke, the man hailed as the King of Soul, was dead. The autopsy later confirmed the cause, a single .22 caliber gunshot wound to the chest fired by Bertha Franklin, the manager of a small, dingy motel. She claimed it was self-defense, but the forensic report and surrounding circumstances only deepened suspicions of a scandal few believe has ever been solved. Cooke's body told a troubling story. The bullet pierced his heart and lungs, killing him almost instantly. But the condition in which he was found raised immediate red flags. His wallet and clothing were missing. Police records stated he had burst into the motel office wearing only a sport coat and shoes, demanding to know the whereabouts of a woman he had been with earlier that evening. Franklin said she feared for her life, retrieved a gun, and fired. Yet the autopsy could not erase the contradictions. How could a man of Cooke's stature, already one of the most famous black singers in America, known for hits like "You Send Me" and "A Change Is Gonna Come," end up half-naked, robbed, and dead in such a humiliating way? His blood alcohol content was elevated, but friends insisted he was never reckless to the point of losing control in public. The inconsistencies between Franklin's testimony, the woman's story, and the forensic evidence fueled conspiracy theories that still linger decades later. Many in the black community believed Cooke was targeted. By 1964, he wasn't just a singer, He was a savvy businessman who had founded his own label and publishing company, daring to claim ownership of his music in an industry notorious for exploiting black artists. Was his murder a setup by those threatened by his independence? Or was it a tragic series of coincidences on a reckless night? The scandal became more painful when the courts quickly ruled Franklin had acted in justifiable self-defense. No charges were filed. To Cook's family, friends, and countless fans, justice felt absent. His autopsy gave the physical facts, but the unanswered questions turned his death into a haunting riddle. Even today, nearly 60 years later, Sam Cooke's name is spoken not only as a pioneer of soul, but as a symbol of injustice. His autopsy was not just a medical document. It was the opening chapter of one of music's greatest unsolved mysteries, Marvin Gaye. On April 1st, 1984, the world learned that Marvin Gaye, the man who gave us What's Going On and Let's Get It On, had been shot dead. The autopsy was brutally clear: 2 gunshot wounds, one entering the chest, piercing his heart, and another grazing his left shoulder. The shooter was not a stranger, not a rival, but his own father, Reverend Marvin Gaye Sr. Marvin had just turned 45 and his career was still vibrant, but the forensic details revealed how quickly everything ended. The bullet to his chest was instantly fatal. The report also noted multiple bruises consistent with the violent altercation that preceded the shooting. He had been living in his parents' home in Los Angeles, financially strained and emotionally worn down after years of depression, drug use, and industry battles. The scandal was not only that his father pulled the trigger, but that Marvin himself had almost predicted it. Friends later recalled him saying, "I feel like my father's going to kill me." The autopsy report became the grim confirmation of a prophecy. The family tension had been brewing for decades. Marvin's father was a strict and often abusive man. On that fateful day, an argument escalated over finances and personal disputes. Marvin, already struggling, confronted him. Within moments, shots rang out. The autopsy revealed how instantaneous the death was. No chance of survival, even if paramedics had arrived sooner. The paradox tore at fans' hearts. Marvin Gaye, a man who wrote some of the most soulful songs about love, peace, and unity, died violently in the place where he should have been safest home. His mother later testified that the argument happened right in front of her. Marvin Sr. was arrested and later pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, serving only 6 years of probation due to his age and health. To many, this leniency felt like another scandal piled on top of the autopsy's brutal revelations. The public mourned not just Marvin's music, but the unbearable irony the man who sang "Mercy, Mercy Me" found none in his final moments. The autopsy did more than confirm death. It forced the world to see Marvin Gaye not as a flawless star, but as a son caught in a tragic web of family dysfunction. His wounds became more than forensic notes. They became symbols of how pain within a family can destroy even the brightest of talents. And that, more than anything, is why Marvin Gaye's autopsy remains one of the most scandalous in music history. Ray Charles. Ray Charles. Robinson, known simply as Ray Charles, was more than a musician. He was a revolutionary force who fused gospel, blues, and R&B into something the world had never heard before. But when he passed on June 10, 2004, the autopsy revealed a scandal wrapped in silence. The official cause of death was liver failure, the result of advanced liver disease. Yet for many fans, that cold report could not fully explain the end of a man who had triumphed over blindness, racism, and poverty. The autopsy showed just how far his body had deteriorated. His liver, severely scarred and unable to function, had shut down completely. Friends recalled that in his last months, his skin carried a yellow pallor, a telltale sign of jaundice from cirrhosis. The once fiery performer was reduced to a frail figure who could barely eat. Still, in a haunting image, family members recounted him sitting at the piano days before his death, trembling hands brushing the keys, trying to sing, even as his body surrendered. Speculation swirled about the root cause. Critics whispered about his long battle with substance use, while others pointed to hepatitis or years of strain from relentless touring. The autopsy confirmed liver failure, but did not definitively tie it to one single factor, leaving a cloud of ambiguity that fueled debate. Fans who had once celebrated his discipline, his ability to break boundaries and craft timeless songs like Georgia on My Mind and Hit the Road, Jack were stunned to see that his final chapter was marked by uncertainty and decline. The scandal wasn't just in the medical file, it was in the perception. Could Ray's relentless drive to perform have shortened his life? Did years of drinking and past heroin use finally exact their toll? Or was it simply the cruel biology of a body exhausted by decades of stress? What remains undeniable is the paradox. Ray Charles, a man who overcame blindness at age 7, who rewrote the rules of music by fusing sacred and secular sounds, was ultimately brought down by an organ inside his body. The autopsy revealed the fragility behind the legend. And while the world mourned his passing, it also confronted the sobering truth: even the strongest spirits are mortal. Rick James. When Rick James died on August 6, 2004, the headlines screamed of scandal, and the autopsy only intensified the noise. Officially, the coroner listed the cause of death as heart failure, but toxicology revealed something far darker. Inside his blood were 9 different substances, a chaotic cocktail that included cocaine, methamphetamine, Xanax, Valium, Vicodin, marijuana, and antidepressants. None were at levels high enough to be individually fatal, but together they painted a disturbing portrait of excess. For decades, Rick James embodied the wild abandon of funk and R&B. His hit, Super Freak, became an anthem of audacity, but his personal life often mirrored his lyrics, loud, unapologetic, and self-destructive. Friends recalled his boast that his body could handle anything. The autopsy, however, exposed that boast as a tragic illusion. His heart, already weakened, could not withstand the constant strain of multiple chemicals pulling in opposite directions, stimulants forcing it to race sedatives, slowing it down, and painkillers numbing everything in between. The report shocked even seasoned professionals. One coroner noted that the clash of substances was like a battlefield inside his body. It wasn't a single overdose. It was years of lifestyle condensed into one final collapse. The scandal wasn't just about drugs, it was about the myth of invincibility that surrounded him. Fans wanted to believe Rick James was untouchable, a man who thrived on chaos. The autopsy proved otherwise. But behind the scandal was a more human tragedy. Friends said Rick had been dealing with diabetes, a stroke, and heart disease in his later years. He was tired, his once powerful stage presence dimmed. The drugs, in some ways, were not just indulgence, but an escape from chronic pain. That nuance didn't make headlines, but it lingered in the report, suggesting a man caught between pleasure and suffering. What made the autopsy scandalous wasn't just the list of drugs, it was the contrast. Here was a man who made the world dance, who once strutted across stages with raw confidence, reduced in death to a cold list of chemical names. Fans mourned not only his passing, but the realization that the party had consumed the host. Rick James's autopsy remains one of the most infamous in R&B history because it stripped away the bravado and revealed the fragile body beneath the legend. Aaliyah. On August 25, 2001, the music world was devastated when a small, twin-engine Cessna 402B crashed just after takeoff from Marsh Harbor Airport in the Bahamas. On board was Aaliyah Dana Houghton, only 22 years old, already crowned the Princess of R&B. The autopsy that followed confirmed what no fan wanted to read. Aaliyah died instantly from severe burns and blunt force trauma, her body unable to survive the violent impact. But it was the details surrounding the crash that made the tragedy scandalous. The investigation report revealed the plane was overloaded by more than 700 pounds. Alongside Aaliyah and her entourage were camera equipment, luggage, and gear from a music video shoot. The pilot, Luis Morales III, was not only unqualified to fly the aircraft legally, but also had cocaine and alcohol in his system at the time of the crash. The autopsy of the pilot made it clear he was impaired, and that impairment cost Aaliyah her future. Rumors later surfaced that Aaliyah had been uneasy about the flight. Some claimed she initially refused to board, sensing the plane was unsafe, but was persuaded or pressured by her team to go ahead. The autopsy noted she had traces of cocaine or alcohol. No, not her. Aaliyah's toxicology was clean. She was healthy, full of promise, and poised to star in films like The Matrix Reloaded. The scandal, therefore, was not her choices, but the negligence of those entrusted with her safety. The juxtaposition was heartbreaking. Just hours earlier, Aaliyah had been filming the video for Rock the Boat, smiling against the turquoise waters of the Bahamas. Days later, the autopsy confirmed her vibrant body had been broken by impact, her life snuffed out by circumstances that could have been avoided. For fans, the report wasn't just science, it was a cruel reminder of what carelessness had stolen. In the aftermath, lawsuits were filed, blame was passed, but no justice could undo the loss. Aaliyah's legacy hits like 1 in a million, and are you that? Somebody was left frozen in time. Her autopsy proved she had the health and vitality to live decades more. Yet one bad decision from those around her ended everything. The scandal lives on, not in her body, but in the haunting question, why did no one protect her when it mattered most? Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was elegance personified. Standing 6 feet tall, with a voice as commanding as her presence, she delivered ballads like You Know How to Love Me with unmatched grace. But on June 30th, 1995, just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, the autopsy confirmed she had taken her own life. The report revealed an overdose of secobarbital and pentobarbital, both barbiturates, marking the end of a singer who had carried the weight of depression for years. The scandal lay not just in the overdose, but in the timing. Fans had already lined up outside the Apollo waiting to hear her sing, while inside her hotel room, Phyllis left behind a note. I'm tired. I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you. Her autopsy confirmed she ingested a fatal quantity of sedatives, shutting down her body before she ever stepped on stage. Hyman's struggles were no secret. She battled bipolar disorder, substance dependency, and financial instability. Friends later revealed she felt trapped by debts and haunted by failed relationships. The autopsy only made her suffering undeniable. The drugs in her system weren't recreational, they were a deliberate choice to end the pain. Her fans were stunned. How could a woman whose voice embodied power and beauty feel so powerless herself? Do you think the music industry provides enough mental health support for artists under constant pressure, or does it feed their despair until it's too late? The Apollo Theater show went on that night, but not as planned. Instead of applause for Phyllis's performance, there was silence and shock. Her autopsy turned what might have been another concert into a permanent farewell. Unlike other stars whose deaths came suddenly, hers bore the unmistakable mark of intention, a decision carried out with precision and finality. The tragedy of Phyllis Hyman's autopsy is its cruel contrast. On paper, it was simply an overdose. In reality, it was the silencing of a voice that still had so much to give. She left at 45 at the very moment when many artists reach their creative maturity. Her legacy is not just in her songs, but in the heavy truth. Her autopsy revealed, sometimes the loudest applause cannot drown out the quiet screams of despair. Billie Holiday. On July 17, 1959, the world lost one of its greatest voices when Billie Holiday, known as Lady Day, died at the age of 44. Her autopsy listed cirrhosis of the liver as the official cause, the culmination of years of substance abuse and poor health. But it wasn't the disease alone that scandalized the world. It was the cruel way society treated her in her final days, turning her death into both a medical tragedy and a social indictment. At the time of her hospitalization, Billie's body was frail. She weighed barely 95 pounds, her liver and heart failing, her skin jaundiced. Yet instead of receiving compassion, she was treated as a criminal. The autopsy file noted her liver was severely scarred and her organs were collapsing. But the scandalous detail that lived outside the report was that she died under police guard, handcuffed to her hospital bed. Detectives had raided her room at Metropolitan Hospital in New York, and found a small packet of heroin. Rather than allowing her dignity in her last hours, they treated her as evidence. Friends recalled the shocking sight of billy tubes in her arms, struggling to breathe while officers stood watch. Reports surfaced that doctors hesitated to administer strong painkillers, fearing accusations of enabling her addiction. The autopsy showed her body was shutting down regardless. But the injustice was clear. Society saw a criminal where it should have seen a dying woman. Her struggles with addiction had long been public. Arrests, bans from cabarets, and harassment by authorities shadowed her career. Yet through it all, she gave the world haunting songs like Strange Fruit, which dared to expose the horrors of racial lynching. The autopsy confirmed the medical facts: liver failure, pulmonary edema, and cardiac failure, but it could not measure the weight of social prejudice that hastened her death. Fans who read about the report were outraged, not just at the loss of her voice, but at the treatment she endured at the end. Billie Holiday's death was more than a line on a coroner's certificate. It was a reminder of how society fails its icons, especially black women punishing their struggles instead of protecting their humanity. Lady Day's autopsy told us how she died, but the scandal told us why her legacy still burns with both beauty and bitterness. Vesta Williams. In September 2011, the music industry was shaken when Vesta Williams, the powerhouse vocalist behind hits like Congratulations and Sweet Sweet Love, was found dead in her California hotel room. She was just 53. For months, speculation swirled about drugs, scandal, and secrets. When the autopsy was finally released, the truth shocked many. Vesta died of hypertensive heart disease, a condition where high blood pressure causes the heart to enlarge and fail. The report was clear: no illegal substances were present. The toxicology screen showed nothing that could explain away her death as overdose or abuse. Instead, her heart was found to be enlarged, struggling after years of untreated hypertension. For fans, this revelation was both relieving and heartbreaking. Relieving because she wasn't consumed by drugs as rumors had suggested, but heartbreaking because the condition was preventable with proper care and management. The scandal wasn't in the autopsy itself, but in the gap between reality and perception. During the months-long delay in releasing the results, tabloids speculated endlessly about cocaine pills or alcohol. People whispered that her weight fluctuations and struggles with the industry hinted at a darker cause. When the report finally arrived, the truth was quieter, but no less devastating. Her body had been giving her warnings for years, and no one had listened. Friends recalled that Vesta was vibrant in the days before her passing, laughing and making plans for future projects. She was still performing, still dreaming. But the autopsy told another story: her heart was already too weak. This contradiction stunned fans who had always associated her with joy and power. Her death became a wake-up call, especially in the black community, where hypertension affects millions and is often undiagnosed. Vesta's autopsy showed that sometimes the most dangerous killers are invisible, creeping in until it's too late. In the end, the scandal was not about drugs or wild living, but about how easily preventable conditions can claim even the strongest among us. Vesta Williams's autopsy stripped away the gossip and revealed the painful truth: she was not undone by excess, but by neglect of her health, of medical awareness, and of the support that might have saved her. Her legacy is her music, but her death remains a silent reminder that hearts, no matter how powerful, can only beat so long without care. Gerald Levert. In November 2006, the music world was stunned when Gerald Levert, the son of OJ's legend Eddie Levert and a star in his own right, was found dead at just 40 years old. Known as the velvet voice of R&B, Gerald was adored for heartfelt ballads like Baby Hold On to Me and I'd Give Anything. But when the autopsy report came out, it told a shocking story that went far beyond a simple heart attack. The Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office concluded Gerald died from acute intoxication due to a combination of prescription and over-the-counter drugs. The toxicology report read like a pharmacy list: Vicodin, Percocet, Darvocet, Xanax, and antihistamines. What made it scandalous was that none of these medications were individually at fatal levels. It was their interaction, painkillers, sedatives, and allergy medicine mixed together, that created a deadly storm in his body. His enlarged heart and high blood pressure only worsened the effect. Friends said Gerald had been battling chronic pain from years of touring and performing. He took the pills not to party, but to keep working. Yet the autopsy revealed he may not have realized how dangerous the combinations were. The coroner emphasized that the toxicity came from therapeutic use, meaning he wasn't overdosing recklessly, but still paid with his life. This revelation hit fans hard. How could a man who mastered control of every note on stage lose control of something as basic as his medicine cabinet? The report also shed light on a deeper issue, America's quiet prescription drug crisis. Gerald's death showed that legal medications, when mixed, can be as deadly as illicit substances. For the Black community, it was a painful reminder that even success and access to doctors don't guarantee safety. Gerald Levert's autopsy didn't just close the book on his life, it opened a conversation about hidden struggles, the fine line between relief and risk, and the haunting reality that sometimes the very tools we use to heal can become the weapons that destroy us. Otis Redding. On December 10, 1967, Otis Redding boarded a small Beechcraft plane with members of his band, the Bar-Kays. They were on their way to a gig in Madison, Wisconsin, laughing full of energy, their music equipment packed alongside them. Minutes after takeoff, the plane plunged into the freezing waters of Lake Monona. The autopsy that followed confirmed Otis died of drowning and massive trauma from the crash. He was just 26. But it wasn't only the autopsy that made his death scandalous, it was the lingering mystery of why the plane went down. The official investigation could not point to a single cause. There was no mechanical failure, identified no clear evidence of pilot error. Instead, the crash was attributed to bad weather and poor visibility, leaving fans with more questions than answers. Otis's body was recovered from the icy waters the next day. The report described water in his lungs, confirming he was alive for at least a brief moment after impact. That detail horrified fans. The man who had just recorded Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, ironically a song about reflection by the water, spent his final seconds submerged in the cold lake. Only one band member, Ben Cawley, survived to tell the story. He later recalled waking up in the freezing water, unable to save his bandmates as the plane sank. The autopsy confirmed what his testimony suggested. Otis never had a chance. His injuries, combined with drowning, made survival impossible. The scandal lies in the preventability. The plane was small, carrying too much equipment, flying in conditions it wasn't designed for. Rumors swirled that Otis had been warned about the weather, but insisted on going ahead to honor his commitments. The pressure of fame and schedules once again put art before safety. What deepened the heartbreak was the timing. Just days earlier, Otis had recorded Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay. Released after his death, it became his first one hit, selling millions and cementing his legacy. The autopsy confirmed his physical end, but the song became the spiritual continuation of his voice. Otis Redding's death, marked by an ambiguous accident and a haunting autopsy, remains one of the greatest losses in music history. He was on the cusp of international superstardom, bridging gospel, R&B, and soul in ways that shaped future generations. The cold report from the coroner could never capture the heat of his performances, but it remains a chilling reminder that even legends can fall victim to forces beyond their control. In the end, these 13 scandalous autopsies remind us that behind the stage lights and roaring crowds, our R&B legends were fragile human beings battling pain pressure and silent demons. From Michael Jackson's nightly fight for sleep to Aaliyah's tragic flight, each report wasn't just medical detail, it was a mirror reflecting the hidden costs of fame. Some were victims of neglect, others of excess, and a few of cruel fate, but all left behind legacies too powerful to erase. Which story shocked you the most, and what does it say about how we treat our icons, legends of Black excellence?